I was buying groceries on a Tuesday afternoon when I saw something that made me drop my basket right there in aisle 7. The person standing 3 people ahead of me in the checkout line looked exactly like someone I knew I would never see again, someone who couldn't possibly be there. When he turned around and our eyes met, his face went completely white, and I realized that my entire world was built on a lie. But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love knowing how far our stories reach. What happened next in that grocery store would change everything I thought I knew about my life. My name is Catherine, and until that Tuesday afternoon 6 months ago, I thought I was a widow. I thought I had buried my husband Robert after watching him die in Methodist Hospital, following what the doctors called a massive heart attack. I thought I had been living alone, grieving the loss of my soulmate of 32 years. I thought a lot of things that turned out to be completely wrong. The man I saw in that grocery store checkout line was definitely Robert. Same height, same sandy brown hair with gray at the temples, same distinctive scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood accident, same way of standing with his weight shifted to his left foot, same habit of tapping his fingers on whatever surface was nearby when he was impatient or anxious. But there were differences too. He was wearing a blue polo shirt I had never seen before. His hair was styled differently, shorter on the sides, and he was with people I didn't recognize. A teenage boy who looked about 16, arguing with him about something involving car keys and curfew. When Robert saw me staring at him, the color drained from his face so completely that I thought he might actually have a heart attack right there in the Food Lion. His mouth opened and closed like he was trying to speak but couldn't find words. The teenage boy noticed his distress and asked if he was okay. "Dad, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Dad. The boy called him Dad. Robert and I never had children. We tried for years, went through fertility treatments, considered adoption, but it never happened. Robert always said he was content with just the 2 of us, that we were each other's family, and that was enough. Apparently, that wasn't entirely true. I stood there in aisle 7, holding a can of green beans in one hand and my purse in the other, trying to process what I was seeing. The man I had buried 6 months ago was standing 20 feet away from me, being called Dad by a teenager who shared his distinctive cleft chin. Robert looked at me for another few seconds, then grabbed the boy's arm and practically ran toward the exit, abandoning his cart full of groceries right there in the checkout line. "Sir, your groceries!" the cashier called after him, but Robert was already pushing through the automatic doors into the parking lot. I followed, of course. How could I not follow? By the time I made it outside, Robert and the boy were climbing into a red Honda Civic, a car I had never seen before. I watched as Robert fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking so badly he could barely get them in the ignition. "Robert!" I called across the parking lot. He froze. For just a moment, he looked at me through the windshield, and I saw something in his expression that I couldn't quite identify. Not just fear or shock, but something deeper. Guilt, maybe, or recognition that something he had been hiding for years was about to be exposed. Then he started the car and drove away, leaving me standing in the Food Lion parking lot with more questions than I could process. I drove home in a daze, going over what I had seen again and again in my mind. There had to be an explanation. Maybe Robert had a twin brother he had never told me about. Maybe I was having some kind of breakdown, seeing things that weren't there because I missed him so much. But I knew what I had seen, and I knew that the man in that grocery store was my husband, the same man whose funeral I had attended 6 months earlier. When I got home, I sat in my kitchen and stared at the sympathy cards that were still displayed on my counter. Dozens of them, from friends, neighbors, Robert's coworkers, all expressing their condolences for my loss. I looked at the life insurance check that was sitting on my desk, $150,000 that had been paid out immediately after Robert's death certificate was filed. Either I was losing my mind or someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to convince me and everyone else that Robert Harrison was dead when he wasn't. That evening, I did something I hadn't done since the funeral. I got out the box of Robert's belongings that the hospital had given me the night he died. His wallet, his wedding ring, his watch, the clothes he had been wearing when he was brought to the emergency room. I examined everything carefully, looking for some sign that these items belonged to someone else, some evidence that would explain what I had seen in the grocery store. Robert's wallet contained his driver's license, with his photo, his insurance cards, his credit cards, $43 in cash, and a receipt from a restaurant called Mario's that was dated 3 days before his supposed death. I had never heard of Mario's. I called directory assistance and got the number for the restaurant. When I called and described Robert, the hostess said she remembered him. "Oh yes, Mr. Harrison. He comes in every Tuesday with his family. Nice man, always asks for table 12 by the window. He was just in last week with his wife and their son." His wife and their son. "Can you describe his wife?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Pretty woman, blonde hair, maybe 45. She always orders the salmon. Their boy is a teenager, looks just like his father." I thanked the hostess and hung up, then stared at the phone for a long time. Robert had been going to Mario's every Tuesday with a wife and son I knew nothing about. He had been there the week after I buried him, but what I discovered next would prove that Robert's fake death was just the beginning of a deception so elaborate it had taken years to construct. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about the look on Robert's face when he saw me in the grocery store, about the teenage boy who called him Dad, about the restaurant hostess who described a family I had never been part of. The next morning, I did something I had never done in 32 years of marriage. I went through Robert's personal belongings systematically, looking for evidence of the life I was beginning to suspect he had been hiding from me. I started in Robert's home office, the room where he paid our bills and managed our finances. I had rarely gone through his desk drawers or filing cabinets. Robert handled all the paperwork, and I trusted him completely. That trust, I was beginning to realize, had been a mistake. In the back of his filing cabinet, behind folders of tax returns and insurance policies, I found something that made my hands shake. A folder labeled Personal Private that contained documents I had never seen before. Bank statements for an account at a different bank, an account I knew nothing about. The statements showed regular deposits and withdrawals going back 8 years. The address on the statements was 1247 Oakwood Drive, about 15 minutes across town from where we lived. There were utility bills for the Oakwood Drive address in Robert's name. Cable, electricity, water, trash pickup, all the services needed to maintain a household. There were insurance policies for a different car, the red Honda Civic I had seen Robert driving in the grocery store parking lot. And at the bottom of the folder, there was a marriage certificate dated 8 years ago. Robert Harrison and Linda Marie Foster, married in a civil ceremony at the county courthouse. My husband had been married to someone else for 8 years while he was married to me. I sat on the floor of his office, surrounded by evidence of Robert's double life, trying to understand how this was possible. How could someone maintain 2 separate marriages, 2 separate households, 2 separate identities for 8 years without either wife knowing about the other? The marriage certificate listed Robert's address as 1247 Oakwood Drive. According to the document, he had been living there when he married Linda Foster, but he had also been living with me. I looked at the bank statements more carefully. The deposits were substantial but irregular, not matching Robert's steady paycheck from the equipment company. These were larger amounts, $5,000 here, $8,000 there, sometimes $15,000 at once. Where had this money come from? I kept searching through Robert's files and found something that made everything click into place. Investment records, property deeds, and rental agreements that I had never seen before. Robert hadn't just been living a double life. He had been building a secret real estate empire. Over the past 8 years, Robert had been buying and selling properties, collecting rental income from apartment buildings, and managing a portfolio of investments that I knew nothing about. The money in the secret bank account wasn't from his regular job. It was from a business he had been running without my knowledge. But here's what really shocked me. According to the financial records, Robert's secret investments had made him, us, wealthy. The properties alone were worth over $800,000, and there was another $300,000 in various investment accounts. I had been living modestly, carefully budgeting our household expenses, while my husband was secretly a millionaire. But there was still the matter of Robert's death. If he had been maintaining 2 households and building a real estate empire successfully for 8 years, why had he faked his death 6 months ago? I found the answer in a folder marked Legal Issues. Inside were letters from lawyers, court documents, and correspondence that revealed Robert's motivation for disappearing. Someone had discovered his bigamous marriages and was threatening to expose him unless he paid them $500,000. Robert was being blackmailed. The letters showed that Robert had been desperately trying to raise the blackmail money without revealing his secret wealth to me. He had been selling properties, liquidating investments, and scrambling to come up with $500,000. But he hadn't been able to raise the money quickly enough. The blackmailer was threatening to go to the police, to the newspapers, to both of his wives. Robert's carefully constructed double life was about to come crashing down. So instead of coming clean to me and Linda, instead of facing the consequences of his deception, Robert had chosen to fake his death and disappear entirely. The folder contained detailed plans for Robert's fake death, including the name of someone who had helped him, Marcus Webb, a paramedic at Methodist Hospital who had access to medical equipment and death certificates. But as I read through Robert's notes, I realized something that made my blood run cold. Robert hadn't planned to disappear forever. He had planned to wait a year or 2 for things to calm down, then resurface with a new identity and claim his secret wealth. He had intended to abandon me permanently and start over with Linda and their son. I was supposed to spend the rest of my life believing my husband was dead, while he lived happily with his other family using the money he had hidden from me. I sat in Robert's office until well past midnight, reading and rereading the documents that revealed the scope of his betrayal. Then I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to let Robert get away with this. The next morning, I drove across town to the address on the bank statements. 1247 Oakwood Drive was a beautiful 2-story house in a neighborhood I had always admired, with a well-maintained garden and expensive cars in the driveway. The red Honda Civic was parked next to a white SUV. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, gathering the courage to ring the doorbell. How do you introduce yourself to the woman who thinks she's your husband's only wife? How do you explain that her husband faked his death to escape his other marriage? Finally, I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. The woman who answered was exactly as the restaurant hostess had described. Blonde hair, pretty, maybe 45 years old. She was wearing a silk blouse and tailored pants, looking like she had just come from an important business meeting. She looked at me with polite curiosity, waiting for me to explain why I was there. "Are you Linda Harrison?" I asked. "Yes. Can I help you?" "My name is Catherine Harrison. I think we need to talk about Robert." Linda's expression changed immediately. She looked confused, then concerned, then frightened. "I'm sorry, I don't understand." "Who are you? How do you know Robert?" "I'm Robert's wife." "His first wife. The one he was married to when he married you 8 years ago." Linda stared at me for a long moment, processing what I had just told her. "That's impossible. Robert was widowed when I met him. His first wife died in a car accident before we got together." "Is that what he told you?" "Yes. He showed me the death certificate and newspaper clipping. He was devastated by her death. It took him years to be ready for a new relationship." Robert had shown Linda fake documents about my death, just as he had arranged fake documents about his own death. His deception had been even more elaborate than I had realized. Linda, I need you to listen to me carefully. I am very much alive, and I've been married to Robert for 32 years. I buried him 6 months ago after what I thought was a heart attack. But yesterday I saw him at the grocery store with a teenage boy who called him Dad. Linda's face went through a series of emotions: disbelief, confusion, anger, and finally a dawning understanding that her world was about to change forever. You're saying Robert has been married to both of us? That he's been lying to me for 8 years? I'm saying Robert faked his death to escape one marriage so he could live openly with the other. And I think there are some things about your husband's finances that you don't know either. Linda invited me inside, her hands shaking as she led me to her living room. The house was beautifully furnished, expensive furniture, original artwork on the walls, Persian rugs on hardwood floors. This wasn't the home of a struggling salesman. This was the home of a wealthy man. Linda, what does Robert do for work? He manages commercial real estate investments. He has his own company, Harrison Properties. He's done very well for himself over the past few years. Harrison Properties. Robert had been running his real estate business under his own name with Linda, while hiding it completely from me. Has he always been wealthy, or is this recent success? When we met, he was comfortable but not rich. But about 4 years ago, his business really took off. We were able to buy this house, upgrade our cars, take nice vacations. Robert said he had gotten better at identifying profitable properties. 4 years ago was when Robert's secret bank account had started showing those large, irregular deposits. He'd been sharing his real financial success with Linda while hiding it from me. I was the wife he kept poor and humble. Linda was the wife he showered with the fruits of his success. Linda, I need to show you something. I showed Linda my wedding ring, my driver's license with Robert's last name, photos of Robert and me together at various stages of our marriage. I showed her copies of the documents I had found in Robert's office, the bank statements, the investment records, the evidence of his double life. Linda studied everything carefully, her face growing paler with each piece of evidence. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Tyler, how am I going to explain this to Tyler?" Tyler was the teenage boy I had seen with Robert in the grocery store, Robert's son, the child he had never had with me but had been raising with Linda for years. "Linda, where is Tyler now?" "He's at school. He's 16, a junior in high school. He adores his father. Robert has been to every baseball game, every school play, every parent-teacher conference. Tyler thinks Robert is the most devoted father in the world, and Robert has been a good father to him. The best. That's what makes this so hard to believe. Robert isn't just a good husband to me. He's been an incredible father to Tyler. He coaches Tyler's baseball team, helps him with homework, talks to him about college plans. They're genuinely close. This was perhaps the cruelest part of Robert's deception. He hadn't just been cheating on 2 wives. He had been giving Linda and Tyler the best version of himself while giving me only a shadow of what he was capable of. Linda, we need to find Robert and get some answers. I don't even know where to begin looking. If he's been lying about being dead, if he's been lying about his first marriage, what else has he been lying about? I think I know where he might be. I told Linda about Marcus Webb, the paramedic who had helped Robert fake his death. If Robert was hiding, he might be staying with the person who had helped him disappear. Linda and I spent the next hour comparing notes about Robert's behavior over the years, looking for clues about where he might be now. He's been acting strangely for the past few weeks, Linda admitted. More nervous than usual, making sure all our important papers were organized, talking about how much he loved Tyler and me. I thought he was just being sentimental, but now I think he was preparing to disappear again. Disappear again? Catherine, what if seeing you in the grocery store made Robert realize he couldn't maintain this charade anymore? What if he's planning to abandon both of us this time? The thought hadn't occurred to me, but Linda was right. Robert had already proven he was willing to fake his death to escape difficult situations. If his double life was about to be exposed, he might decide to disappear completely rather than face the consequences. We need to find him before he runs, I said. And we need to make sure he can't access any of the money he's been hiding. Linda called Robert's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried his office, but his secretary said he had called in sick and wouldn't be in for the rest of the week. He's already running, Linda said. We need to call the police. Not yet. Let me try to find Marcus Webb first. If Robert is with him, maybe we can confront them together and get some answers before involving the authorities. I found Marcus Webb's address in the phone book and convinced Linda to drive there with me. If we were going to confront Robert about his double life, we should do it together. Marcus Webb lived in a small apartment complex about 10 miles outside of town. When we knocked on his door, a thin, nervous-looking man in his 50s answered, "Mr. Webb, we need to talk to you about Robert Harrison." Marcus's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Mr. Webb, I'm Catherine Harrison, and this is Linda Harrison. We're both married to Robert, and we know you helped him fake his death 6 months ago. We're not here to cause trouble. We just want to find him and get some answers." Marcus looked back and forth between Linda and me, clearly trying to decide what to do. "He's not here," Marcus said finally. "But you're right. I helped him stage his death. I never thought it would go this far. Where is he?" "I don't know. He came by yesterday, panicked, saying his plan had fallen apart and he needed to disappear for real this time. He asked me for help getting out of the country, but I told him I was done. I'm not going to risk my career and my freedom for his schemes anymore." "Mr. Webb, do you have any idea where Robert might go if he was trying to leave the country?" "He mentioned something about property he owned in Mexico. Some kind of vacation rental that he used as an investment. He said if things ever got really bad, he could disappear there and live off the rental income. Property in Mexico." I thought about the investment records I had found in Robert's files. There had been references to international properties, but I hadn't paid attention to the details. Did he say where in Mexico? Puerto Vallarta, I think. He said he had bought a condo there a few years ago and had been renting it out to tourists. Linda and I looked at each other. Robert had been planning his escape route for years, buying property in a country where he could disappear if his double life was ever exposed. "Mr. Webb, we need you to call the police and tell them what you know. Robert has been committing fraud, and if he leaves the country, he might never face consequences for what he's done." Marcus nodded reluctantly. "I know. I've been feeling guilty about helping him fake his death ever since it happened. I never meant for anyone to get hurt." An hour later, Linda and I were sitting in a police station, giving statements to Detective Sarah Rodriguez about Robert's fake death, his bigamous marriages, and his planned escape to Mexico. "Mrs. Harrison and Mrs. Harrison," Detective Rodriguez said with a slight smile at the awkwardness of addressing two women with the same married name. "This is a complex case involving multiple crimes, fraud, bigamy, and conspiracy. We're going to need time to investigate all the evidence you've provided. Detective, what about Robert's plan to flee to Mexico? Can you stop him? We're already working with Mexican authorities to locate the property Mr. Webb mentioned. If Robert Harrison is planning to leave the country, we'll do everything we can to apprehend him before he does." "And what happens to us? To our marriages, our assets, our lives?" Detective Rodriguez looked sympathetic. "That's going to require some legal sorting out. Technically, Mrs. Catherine Harrison's marriage is legal since it came first. Mrs. Linda Harrison's marriage would be considered invalid due to the existing marriage. But given that Linda married Robert in good faith, not knowing about the prior marriage, the courts will likely work out a fair resolution regarding property and custody." Linda squeezed my hand. In the space of 2 days, we had gone from being strangers to being allies in the strangest situation either of us had ever faced. "Detective, what about Tyler? How do we explain to a 16-year-old boy that his father is a criminal who has been living a lie for his entire life? That's going to be the hardest part, Detective Rodriguez admitted. But Tyler is going to need the truth, and he's going to need both of you to help him process it. 3 days later, Detective Rodriguez called to tell us that Robert had been arrested at the airport in Puerto Vallarta, trying to board a plane to Guatemala with a fake passport. He had almost $200,000 in cash with him, the detective told us, money he had withdrawn from various accounts over the past week. He was definitely planning to disappear permanently. Robert was extradited back to the United States and charged with fraud, bigamy, and conspiracy. The legal process took months, but eventually Robert pled guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. He was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. But the real story isn't about Robert's crimes or his punishment. The real story is about what happened to Linda, Tyler, and me in the aftermath of discovering the truth. The first few months were incredibly difficult. Tyler struggled to understand how his father could have lied to him so completely. He was angry, confused, and heartbroken. He blamed himself, wondering if he had somehow driven his father to live a double life. Linda and I worked together to help Tyler through this trauma. We found him a counselor who specialized in helping teenagers deal with parental betrayal and criminal behavior. "Tyler," I told him during one of our long conversations, "your father's choices have nothing to do with you. You are not responsible for his actions, and you don't have to carry his shame." "But how could I not know?" Tyler asked. "How could I live with someone for 16 years and not realize he was lying about everything?" "Because you trusted him, and trust is a good thing," Linda answered. "Your father took advantage of our trust, but that doesn't mean we were wrong to trust him. It means he was wrong to betray us." Over time, Tyler began to heal. He continued playing baseball, kept up his grades in school, and started talking about his college plans again. But more importantly, he began to see Linda and me not as victims of his father's deception, but as strong women who had survived a difficult situation and were building new lives for themselves. "Catherine," Tyler said to me one day, about a year after Robert's arrest, "I know this sounds weird, but I'm glad you found us. If you hadn't seen Dad at the grocery store, he would have kept lying to all of us forever." "Tyler, I'm glad I found you too. I always wanted children, and while I'm sorry about the circumstances, I'm grateful to have you in my life now." The legal resolution of our situation took almost 2 years. The courts determined that since my marriage to Robert was legal and Linda's wasn't, I had the stronger claim to Robert's assets. But Linda had been married to Robert in good faith and had a child to support. The judge worked out a settlement that seemed fair to both of us. Linda kept the house on Oakwood Drive and received half of Robert's business assets. I kept our original house and the other half of the business assets. Tyler's college fund was protected and expanded, but more importantly than the legal resolution was the personal resolution that Linda and I found. "Catherine," Linda said to me after the final court hearing, "I know this started with the worst possible circumstances, but I want you to know that meeting you has been one of the best things that's happened to me." "I feel the same way, Linda. I never had a sister, but I think this is what having a sister must feel like. And that's exactly what we became. Sisters, not through blood, but through shared experience and mutual support." Linda went back to school and earned a real estate license, eventually taking over management of some of Robert's former properties. She turned out to have a natural talent for business and soon was earning more money than she ever had when she was depending on Robert. Tyler graduated high school with honors and received a full scholarship to study engineering at the State University. He stayed close to both Linda and me, calling us both Mom and visiting both houses regularly. As for me, I discovered that life could begin again at 62. I had always been interested in interior design, but Robert had discouraged me from pursuing it as anything more than a hobby. With my share of Robert's assets, I was able to start my own interior design business. Catherine's second chances became successful beyond my wildest dreams. I specialized in helping people redesign their homes after major life changes, divorces, deaths, empty nests, new marriages. I understood better than most designers what it meant to need a fresh start. 3 years after Robert's arrest, I was featured in a magazine article about women who had started new careers after age 60. The article mentioned my unusual story, how discovering my husband's double life had led to discovering my own hidden talents. That article led to something I never expected: romance. A widower named James contacted me after reading the article. His wife had died 2 years earlier, and he was looking for help redesigning his home to reflect his new life as a single person. "Mrs. Harrison," James said during our first consultation, "I have to admit I didn't just call you because of your design work. I was impressed by your story. It takes courage to start over at our age." James was 70, a retired teacher who had been married for 45 years before losing his wife to cancer. He was kind, honest, and refreshingly straightforward after years of living with Robert's deceptions. "James," I told him during our third meeting, "I have to be completely honest with you about something. I'm not sure I'll ever be able to trust anyone completely again. My husband spent 32 years lying to me about fundamental aspects of his life. Catherine, I understand that concern completely, but I think maybe that's why we might be good for each other. We're both old enough to know that life is short and honesty is precious. We don't have time for games or deception." James and I dated for 2 years before we married. It was a small ceremony with Linda and Tyler in attendance alongside James's children and grandchildren. "Catherine," Linda said at the wedding reception, "Robert thought he was so clever, keeping us separated and lying to both of us. But look what happened. He lost everything, and we gained each other, and now James. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best discoveries. Robert was released from prison last year after serving 4 years of his sentence. He tried to contact Linda, Tyler, and me, but none of us responded to his letters or phone calls. I don't hate him," I told Tyler when he asked how I felt about his father's release. "But I don't need him in my life either. I built something better than what I had when I was married to him." Today, 5 years after that shocking encounter in the grocery store, I have a life that's richer and more fulfilling than anything I had during my 32 years with Robert. I run a successful business that helps other people start over after difficult life changes. I have a loving husband who treats me as an equal partner in all decisions. I have a wonderful relationship with Linda, who has become my dearest friend and confidant. And I have Tyler, the son I never had but always wanted. "Catherine," Tyler said to me at his college graduation last month, "I know my father hurt you badly, but I want you to know that his lies brought something good into my life. I gained a second mother who taught me that you can survive anything if you face it with courage and honesty." The man I saw in aisle 7 of that grocery store thought he had outsmarted everyone. He thought he could maintain his elaborate deception forever, keeping 2 wives and 2 families separated and controlled through lies. But Robert underestimated the strength of the women he was deceiving. He never imagined that Linda and I would become allies instead of enemies. He never considered that his son would choose truth over comfortable lies. Most of all, he never understood that while deception might work for a while, truth has a way of revealing itself when you least expect it. Sometimes, the most shocking discoveries lead to the most wonderful transformations. Sometimes, learning that your entire life was built on lies is the first step toward building something authentic and beautiful. The person I saw in that grocery store changed everything, but not in the way he intended. He thought he was protecting his carefully constructed deception. Instead, he triggered a chain of events that led to justice, healing, and new beginnings for everyone he had tried to deceive. But there's so much more to this story that I haven't told you yet. The journey from that shocking moment in the grocery store to the life I have now wasn't just about discovering Robert's lies and finding justice. It was about discovering who I really was underneath 32 years of being someone else's shadow. In the months following Robert's arrest, while the legal proceedings dragged on, I found myself facing a question I had never had to ask before. Who was Catherine Harrison when she wasn't defined by being Robert's wife? For 3 decades, I had shaped my identity around Robert's needs, his schedule, his preferences. I cooked the foods he liked, watched the television shows he chose, socialized with his friends, lived in the house he selected. Even my hobbies had been influenced by what Robert found acceptable for his wife to enjoy. "Mrs. Harrison," my therapist Dr. Martinez asked me during one of our sessions, "when was the last time you made a decision based purely on what you wanted, without considering how it might affect Robert or how he might react?" I sat in her office for 5 full minutes thinking, and couldn't come up with a single example from the past decade. "That's what we need to work on," Dr. Martinez said gently, "learning to hear your own voice again." The process wasn't easy. I had to relearn simple things like what foods I actually enjoyed eating when I wasn't cooking for Robert's taste preferences. I discovered that I loved spicy Mexican food, which Robert had always said was too harsh for his stomach. I found out that I preferred jazz music to the classical music Robert insisted was more sophisticated. Most surprisingly, I learned that I was much more social and outgoing than I had been during my marriage. Robert had always claimed that too much socializing exhausted him, so we rarely entertained guests or accepted invitations to parties. Without Robert's influence, I found myself accepting invitations from neighbors, joining a book club, and even taking a pottery class at the community center. "Catherine, you're like a completely different person," my neighbor Margaret told me after I hosted my first dinner party. "You're so much more confident and lively than you used to be." Margaret was right. I was becoming someone I had never been allowed to be during my marriage. But the real transformation began when I decided to pursue my interest in interior design seriously. I had always loved arranging and rearranging furniture, choosing colors and fabrics, creating beautiful spaces. During my marriage, this had been limited to our own home, and even then, Robert had final approval on any major changes. "Robert never liked me to spend too much money on decorating," I explained to Linda one afternoon as we sat in her kitchen, planning how to help Tyler adjust to his father's imprisonment. He said it was frivolous, that we should be saving money for more important things. "What kinds of important things?" Linda asked. I never really knew. He handled all our finances, so I assumed we were saving for retirement or emergencies. Now I realize he was probably hiding money for his other life. Linda nodded thoughtfully. "You know, Catherine, with your share of Robert's assets, you could afford to do anything you wanted. Have you ever thought about turning your design interests into a business?" The idea had never occurred to me. During my marriage, I had thought of interior design as just a hobby, something I did to pass time while Robert was traveling. But as I considered Linda's suggestion, I realized that I had spent 32 years creating beautiful spaces within the constraints Robert had imposed. What might I be capable of if those constraints were removed? I started small. I offered to redecorate a room in Linda's house just to see if I could create something professional quality. Linda gave me complete creative freedom and a modest budget. The result exceeded both of our expectations. I transformed Linda's outdated formal dining room into a warm, inviting space that reflected her personality and lifestyle. The room felt elegant but comfortable, sophisticated but welcoming. "Catherine, this is incredible," Linda said when I revealed the finished room. "This doesn't look like something a hobbyist did. This looks like the work of a professional designer. Do you really think so? I think you should consider getting certified as an interior designer. I think you have a real gift for this." Linda's encouragement gave me the confidence to enroll in a certification program at the local community college. At 63, I was the oldest student in most of my classes, but I was also the most motivated. "Mrs. Harrison," my instructor, Professor Williams, told me halfway through the program, "your work shows a level of emotional intelligence that's rare in this field. You have an intuitive understanding of how people want to feel in their spaces." "What do you mean?" Many designers focus on creating spaces that look beautiful in magazines, but you create spaces that feel like home. That's a much more valuable skill. Professor Williams was right. I had spent so many years adapting to Robert's preferences that I had developed a keen sensitivity to what other people needed from their environments. I could walk into someone's home and immediately understand what was missing, what changes would make them feel more comfortable and happy in their space. My first paying client was Margaret, my neighbor. She hired me to redecorate her living room after her husband died. "Catherine," Margaret explained, "I can't bear to sit in this room anymore. Everything in here reminds me of Harold, but I'm not ready to get rid of his things entirely. I need the space to feel different, but I don't want to erase his memory." It was a delicate balance, but I understood exactly what Margaret needed. I rearranged the furniture to create new sightlines and conversation areas. I incorporated some of Harold's belongings into new displays that honored his memory without dominating the space. I added colors and textures that reflected Margaret's personality, rather than the neutral palette she and Harold had chosen together. The process wasn't easy. I had to relearn simple things like what foods I actually enjoyed eating when I wasn't cooking for Robert's taste preferences. I discovered that I loved spicy Mexican food, which Robert had always said was too harsh for his stomach. I found out that I preferred jazz music to the classical music Robert insisted was more sophisticated. Most surprisingly, I learned that I was much more social and outgoing than I had been during my marriage. Robert had always claimed that too much socializing exhausted him, so we rarely entertained guests or accepted invitations to parties. Without Robert's influence, I found myself accepting invitations from neighbors, joining a book club, and even taking a pottery class at the community center. "Catherine, you're like a completely different person," my neighbor Margaret told me after I hosted my first dinner party. "You're so much more confident and lively than you used to be." Margaret was right. I was becoming someone I had never been allowed to be during my marriage. But the real transformation began when I decided to pursue my interest in interior design seriously. I had always loved arranging and rearranging furniture, choosing colors and fabrics, creating beautiful spaces. During my marriage, this had been limited to our own home, and even then, Robert had final approval on any major changes. Robert never liked me to spend too much money on decorating. I explained to Linda one afternoon as we sat in her kitchen, planning how to help Tyler adjust to his father's imprisonment. He said it was frivolous, that we should be saving money for more important things. "What kinds of important things?" Linda asked. I never really knew. He handled all our finances, so I assumed we were saving for retirement or emergencies. Now I realize he was probably hiding money for his other life. Linda nodded thoughtfully. "You know, Catherine, with your share of Robert's assets, you could afford to do anything you wanted. Have you ever thought about turning your design interests into a business?" The idea had never occurred to me. During my marriage, I had thought of interior design as just a hobby, something I did to pass time while Robert was traveling. But as I considered Linda's suggestion, I realized that I had spent 32 years creating beautiful spaces within the constraints Robert had imposed. What might I be capable of if those constraints were removed? I started small. I offered to redecorate a room in Linda's house just to see if I could create something professional quality. Linda gave me complete creative freedom and a modest budget. The result exceeded both of our expectations. I transformed Linda's outdated formal dining room into a warm, inviting space that reflected her personality and lifestyle. The room felt elegant but comfortable, sophisticated but welcoming. "Catherine, this is incredible," Linda said when I revealed the finished room. "This doesn't look like something a hobbyist did. This looks like the work of a professional designer. Do you really think so? I think you should consider getting certified as an interior designer. I think you have a real gift for this." Linda's encouragement gave me the confidence to enroll in a certification program at the local community college. At 63, I was the oldest student in most of my classes, but I was also the most motivated. Mrs. Harrison, my instructor, Professor Williams, told me halfway through the program. Your work shows a level of emotional intelligence that's rare in this field. You have an intuitive understanding of how people want to feel in their spaces. What do you mean? Many designers focus on creating spaces that look beautiful in magazines, but you create spaces that feel like home. That's a much more valuable skill. Professor Williams was right. I had spent so many years adapting to Robert's preferences that I had developed a keen sensitivity to what other people needed from their environments. I could walk into someone's home and immediately understand what was missing, what changes would make them feel more comfortable and happy in their space. My first paying client was Margaret, my neighbor. She hired me to redecorate her living room after her husband died. "Catherine," Margaret explained, "I can't bear to sit in this room anymore. Everything in here reminds me of Harold, but I'm not ready to get rid of his things entirely. I need the space to feel different, but I don't want to erase his memory." It was a delicate balance, but I understood exactly what Margaret needed. I rearranged the furniture to create new sightlines and conversation areas. I incorporated some of Harold's belongings into new displays that honored his memory without dominating the space. I added colors and textures that reflected Margaret's personality rather than the neutral palette she and Harold had chosen together. When I revealed the finished room, Margaret cried. "It's perfect," she said. "I can feel Harold's presence, but I can also feel like myself in here. How did you know exactly what I needed?" "Because I've been through something similar," I told her. "Not death, but the end of a life I thought I knew." Sometimes we need our spaces to help us remember who we are when we're not defined by our relationships with other people. Word of mouth spread quickly in our small town. Within 6 months of completing my certification, I had a waiting list of clients. People weren't just hiring me to make their homes look beautiful. They were hiring me to help them create spaces that reflected their authentic selves. Many of my clients were going through major life transitions: divorce, widowhood, children leaving home, retirement, remarriage. They needed their homes to evolve with them, to support the people they were becoming rather than the people they used to be. Catherine's Second Chances became known for helping people create homes that celebrated new beginnings rather than mourning what was lost. One of my most challenging clients was a woman named Patricia, who had recently divorced her husband of 25 years after discovering his affair. "I want you to completely erase any trace of him from this house," Patricia told me during our initial consultation. "I want it to look like he never existed." "Patricia, can I ask you something? Do you have children?" "2 daughters. They're grown now, but they come to visit with their families." "And do your daughters have good memories of their father, despite his betrayal of you?" Patricia considered this. "Yes, he was a good father, even if he was a terrible husband." "Then completely erasing him from the house might be more painful than healing, especially for your daughters and grandchildren. Let me suggest something different. Instead of erasing Patricia's ex-husband from the house, I helped her reclaim the space as her own. We kept family photos that included him, but moved them to less prominent locations. We replaced furniture they had chosen together with pieces that reflected Patricia's individual taste. We created new focal points that celebrated Patricia's interests and accomplishments. The result was a home that acknowledged the family's history, while clearly establishing Patricia as the central figure in the space. "Catherine, this is exactly what I needed, even though it wasn't what I asked for," Patricia said. "You understood what I needed better than I did." That became my specialty, understanding what people needed rather than just what they thought they wanted. My business grew beyond anything I had imagined. I hired 2 assistants and expanded from residential design to small commercial projects. I was featured in local magazines and invited to speak at design conferences. But the most rewarding part of my work wasn't the recognition or the financial success. It was the letters I received from clients whose lives had been transformed by creating spaces that truly reflected who they were. One letter from a client named Susan particularly touched me. "Dear Catherine, it's been a year since you redesigned my home after my husband's death, and I wanted you to know how much it has meant to me. Before you worked with me, I felt lost in my own house. Everything reminded me of what I had lost. Now my home feels like a celebration of who I am and what I've survived. You didn't just redesign my house. You helped me redesign my life. Thank you for showing me that it's possible to honor the past while embracing the future." That letter made me realize that my work was about much more than choosing paint colors and arranging furniture. I was helping people create physical environments that supported their emotional healing and growth. James noticed the change in me long before we started dating. "Catherine," he said during one of our design consultations, "you seem to glow when you talk about your work. It's clear that you've found your calling." "I never expected to find my calling at 63, I admitted. "For so many years, I thought my purpose was to be a supportive wife. I never imagined I had other talents worth developing." "Maybe being a supportive wife prepared you for this work," James suggested. "Understanding how to create environments where people feel comfortable and valued. Isn't that what you did in your marriage, even if it wasn't appreciated?" James was right. All those years of creating a peaceful, welcoming home for Robert, of anticipating his needs and preferences, had taught me skills that translated perfectly into professional design work. The difference was that now I was using those skills to help people feel good about themselves, rather than to keep someone else comfortable while hiding my own identity. My relationship with James developed slowly and naturally. Unlike my whirlwind romance with Robert when I was young, this relationship was built on mutual respect, shared values, and honest communication. "Catherine," James said on our third date, "I want to be completely honest with you about something. I'm not looking for someone to take care of me or to replace my late wife. I'm looking for a partner, someone to share adventures with." "James, I appreciate that honesty. I'm not looking to lose myself in another relationship. I've worked too hard to find myself to give that up now." Our courtship was a revelation. James encouraged my business rather than seeing it as competition for my attention. He celebrated my successes and offered support during challenging projects. He introduced me to his friends and family as Catherine, the interior designer, not just as his girlfriend. Most importantly, James never tried to change me or mold me into his ideal partner. He fell in love with the person I had become, not some version of me he hoped I could be. "Catherine," James said on the evening he proposed, "I love your independence, your creativity, your strength. I'm not asking you to give up any of that to be with me. I'm asking you to share it with me." Our wedding was everything my first wedding hadn't been. Instead of a large, formal ceremony that reflected Robert's social ambitions, James and I had an intimate gathering that celebrated our authentic selves. Linda served as my matron of honor. Tyler walked me down the aisle, and James's children welcomed me into their family with genuine warmth. "Catherine," Tyler said in his speech at the reception, "when I first met you, I was confused and angry about my father's lies. But watching you turn that betrayal into strength, watching you build a new life based on truth and authenticity, you've shown me what real courage looks like." Linda's speech brought tears to everyone's eyes. "Catherine, when we first met, we were both victims of the same man's deception, but we refused to stay victims. We became sisters. We became each other's strength, and now we're family by choice rather than by circumstance. That's more powerful than any blood relationship." Even James's late wife's sister, Eleanor, spoke at our reception. "I want everyone to know that Margaret would have loved Catherine. Margaret always said that true love isn't about replacing what you've lost. It's about being brave enough to open your heart again. Catherine has brought joy back into James's life, and that would have made Margaret so happy." Our honeymoon was a 2-week trip to Italy, where James and I toured historic homes and gardens. It was part vacation, part inspiration for my design work, and completely different from the practical, budget-conscious trips Robert and I had taken. "Catherine," James said as we sat in a cafe in Florence, "I love watching you experience beauty. Your whole face lights up when you see something that inspires you." "I feel like I'm seeing the world with new eyes," I told him. "For so many years, I looked at everything through the filter of what Robert would think or whether we could afford it. Now I can just appreciate beauty for its own sake." That trip inspired a new direction in my design work. I began incorporating elements of European design into my projects, helping clients create spaces that felt worldly and sophisticated. But the trip also gave me something more valuable than design inspiration. It gave me the experience of being completely myself with someone who loved me exactly as I was. Our marriage has been everything my first marriage wasn't: honest, supportive, and based on mutual respect. James and I make decisions together, share household responsibilities, and encourage each other's individual interests and friendships. "Catherine," my therapist Dr. Martinez said during one of my final sessions, "you've accomplished something remarkable. You've not only survived a devastating betrayal, you've used it as a catalyst to become the person you were always meant to be." She was right. The woman I am now, confident, successful, creatively fulfilled, surrounded by people who love and respect me, is someone I never could have become if I had stayed in my first marriage. Robert's deception, as cruel and hurtful as it was, ultimately set me free to discover my authentic self. Last month, Tyler graduated from engineering school summa cum laude. Linda and I sat together in the audience, both of us crying with pride as our son, because that's what he became to both of us, walked across the stage. "You know," Tyler said at his graduation party, "I used to be angry that my father lied to us. But if he hadn't, Catherine and I never would have found each other. I never would have learned what it means to have a mother who supports your dreams instead of trying to control them." Tyler is now engaged to a wonderful young woman named Sarah, who knows our whole story and loves our unconventional family. They're planning a wedding for next spring, and Tyler has asked both Linda and me to walk him down the aisle. "I have two mothers," he explained to Sarah's parents. "One who gave birth to me and raised me, and one who showed me that family is about love and choice, not just biology." Linda's real estate business has flourished. She now owns and manages several investment properties and has become one of the most successful agents in our area. "Catherine," Linda said recently, "I never would have had the confidence to start my own business if I hadn't seen you start yours. Watching you succeed gave me permission to believe I could succeed too." Linda is also in a wonderful relationship with a man named David, who treats her like the intelligent, capable woman she is. They've been together for 2 years, and I think another wedding might be in our future. As for Robert, he was released from prison 6 months ago. He sent letters to all of us, apologizing for his actions and asking for forgiveness. Tyler was the only one who responded. "I don't forgive you yet," Tyler wrote to his father, "but I want you to know that the 3 women you tried to deceive and control are all stronger and happier now than they ever were when you were manipulating their lives. Your lies didn't destroy us, they freed us." I keep Robert's letter in my desk drawer unopened. Someday I might be ready to read it, but not yet. I've worked too hard to build my new life to risk having it disrupted by explanations or apologies for the old one. My business continues to grow. I've written a book called Designing Your Second Act, Creating Spaces for New Beginnings that will be published next year. I'm also developing a workshop series for women over 50 who want to redesign their lives along with their homes. "Catherine," James said last week as we sat in our garden, "do you ever regret seeing Robert in that grocery store? Do you ever wish you had just turned around and walked away?" I considered his question seriously. That moment in aisle 7 had led to so much pain, confusion, and upheaval, but it had also led to everything good in my current life. "No," I said finally, "I don't regret it. That moment changed everything, but it changed everything for the better. I just didn't know it at the time. Even though it was so painful, especially because it was so painful, Sometimes you have to lose everything you think you want in order to discover what you actually need. Today, as I write this story 7 years after that shocking encounter in the grocery store, I can honestly say that I am the happiest I have ever been in my life. I have a marriage based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. I have a successful business that allows me to help other people create positive changes in their lives. I have a son who chose me as much as I chose him. I have a sister friend in Linda who understands me in ways that only someone who has survived similar betrayal can understand. Most importantly, I have myself. I know who I am now, independent of anyone else's expectations or limitations. I know what I want, what I value, and what I'm capable of achieving. The person I saw in that grocery store thought he had cleverly managed to keep 2 separate lives going indefinitely. He thought he could control and deceive the women who loved him without consequences. But Robert underestimated the power of truth, the strength of women who support each other, and the human capacity for growth and renewal. He thought he was protecting his deceptions when he ran from me that day. Instead, he set in motion a series of events that led to the destruction of his false life and the creation of 3 authentic, fulfilling lives for the people he had tried to manipulate. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. Sometimes, discovering that your entire life was built on lies is exactly what you need to start building something true. And sometimes, at 62 years old, you discover that your real life is just beginning.